So what I need to do, because I have this whole thing laid out here for our German viewers, and I'm going to erase that right now. So you just need to give me a minute to get rid of that so we can redraw this, because this is what today is all about. So what I have is I have a little announcement, because we have been sharing our fundamentals of neurofunctional integration. That's our course 1 material, which is 18 videos that show you how this works, and script. I think it's about 70 pages of script that we have, so that you can learn neurofunctional integration, the very basic principles. So what we did for a couple of weeks now, for a couple of months actually already, that we have that available in German for free. And what we actually did already last year is we recorded everything in English. So all the teaching steps are already recorded, and we already have an English manual. We just never put it online, but we're going to do that, and it's almost ready. So I'm going to also post that when it's ready. So we're going to have it, because we have some trouble with our website, or not trouble, we have to adjust a few things on our website to get that all out there in English. So what we're going to post that on YouTube. So there's going to be a playlist with 18 videos, all the fundamentals of neurofunctional integration. And with the videos, there's going to be a link to download the whole manual. So that's going to be online probably next week. Because the videos are already there, all I have to do is upload the manual, and then we have to just give it out to you guys so you can watch. All right, so what do we want to talk about today? Today we want to talk about the midbrain structure. So I just want to quickly go back to where we've come from so far. So this is NeuroThursday number 9, and you might now think, okay, there's only one more to go next time in 2 weeks. No, of course we're going to continue that. So we're going to try to put the new dates into the link you already have if you are on Zoom, but we're going to be on Instagram, of course, and we're going to record everything. And I'm very happy that even if there's not that many people around when we're live, but there's a lot of people watching the videos afterwards. So I hope all this information is going out there, because we need neurology out there for everybody. That is for sure. So nobody can run around in medicine, in my eyes, not knowing about basic principles of functional neurology. It's just not possible. Because if a patient comes in with a knee pain, I just look at the knee without looking at the eyes or the proprioceptive system or other parts of the body, the integrated function of the system, and integrated function equals neurological function, I might not resolve the problem on the long run. So I need neurology. Everybody needs neurology. Everything is neurological. Somebody coming in with digestive problems, it could be a neurological problem. Somebody comes in with a headache, could be a neurological problem. Somebody comes in with anxiety, could be probably a neurological problem. Could also be a biochemical problem, of course, but in the end, some neurology is always in place. Knee pain, neurology. So it's not orthopedic, it's not internal medicine, it's not general practitioner, it's not all these things where we kind of divide it. And I had an engineer who kind of said that in a nice way, said, well, you can have a differentiation. So you look at all the single parts of an equation, but you can also have an integral function. I don't know if you say it like that in English, which is a mathematical function where you look at it all, how it comes together. So that's what we need to do, and this is what the nervous system is about. So everybody's talking about holistic medicine or integrational medicine or all these things. Well, what is putting all the parts of the body together? It's the brain. That's what we're talking about. So we talked about receptor sites. We talked about receptors like in the knee or in the hip. So that's like the first part. So if somebody comes in and he has a hip problem because he fell on his hip or he had surgery on his hip and he still has a hip problem, I probably look there first, because it might not be a brain issue. In terms of a brain dysfunction up here, it might just be a peripheral functional problem of the nerve. Of course, all the testing we do, all the functional testing on the receptors, always go back to the brain, because the perception and also the integration and the calculations for movement then not only happen in the brain, also in the spinal cord, of course, but in the central nervous system. That's where most of the music is playing. So every time we work somewhere, and that's what all people do that work on other people, when they touch, it's neurological. When they do some other stimulus, ice on there, it's neurological. So question always is, and that's the question I like to ask, and we never get an answer to that, what is not neurological? Okay, maybe the excretion of some kind of peptide, of a leukocyte in a wound or so. Maybe that is not all done neurologically. Maybe that's more a biochemical aspect. Okay, so I'm open to all discussions about what is not neurological in the body. So we talked about receptor sites, we talked about nerve function, so the mechanical aspect of nerves, the cable that's going through the body, transmitting information from the body to the brain or from the brain to the body. So we talked about the spinal cord. Spinal cord, some people say, well, it's just a bunch of cables going up and down. No, it is not, absolutely not. Spinal cord is movement. All the basic movement patterns are in the spinal cord. So I call that the autonomic somatomotor system. So like the autonomic nervous system for the gut, that to me is the autonomic motor system. That's the spinal cord. So if I don't go to the spinal cord, or somebody has a movement issue, especially if somebody comes in and said both hips are hurting or both knees are hurting. Why would both knees hurt? When he maybe fell on the right knee, but maybe he caused a dysfunction in his spinal cord. So I have to look at the spinal cord function to fix the problem. So that's probably also why chiropractic, or we like to call it chirotherapy, works, because we're working on segmental issues of movement, and that could improve a lot of things, even if it's pain in the foot, stuff you manipulate, I don't know, L5, L4 or something, then this improves because the function improves, okay? Not because only the joint improves, the visceral function or the autonomic function in the segment improves, so the blood flow improves, all these things can improve, and that will cause the spinal cord to work better, and that will cause the nerves, the peripheral nerves to work better. So things like that can happen. So spinal cord, in my opinion, very, very important. And then we went to the brain stem. That's what we did last time and the time before that. We talked about brain stem areas, medulla, pons, cerebellum, mesencephalon. So I put all these together just to simplify it. And we did some theory and we did some practical issues. And today we're going to go up one more level, midbrain areas. And a lot of people, like I already said in the video announcing this day, would like to talk about the limbic system. Say, well, the limbic system is the emotional brain. Well, no, it's not. It's not the emotional brain. The limbic system is more visceral or motor brain. But of course, it takes in other information that might make it more emotional or things like that, but it's not the emotional brain. So emotion happen everywhere in the brain. If somebody's interested in emotion, then you should read Lisa Feldman-Barré, How Emotions Are Made. That's the best book out there in my view in terms of the current science on emotions in the brain, or emotions and the brain. So, yes, we're going to be talking about things like emotion or cognition or thinking, remembering. We're going to talk about that because the midbrain structures are involved in that. But the problem with the term limbic system is that it's actually an anatomical term. So it's the limbus is like the edge or the part. This is where one part ends and this is where the next starts. So we have the brain stem and then we have the limbic system and then we have the cortex. So, but it's not a functional thing. So nobody intended to call it the limbic system because it's like a functional unit. It's not. It's a whole bunch of different functions in there. Of course, they're somehow interconnected, but it's just too diverse to just say, well, the limbic system is the emotional brain. So that I don't use it. And also you read Lisa Feldman-Barré, she doesn't use it. She says that's not appropriate, not an appropriate term. It's too simple, too much simplification in that. And also other authors I read, like Jürgi Buzaki or so, they say don't call it limbic system as in terms of a functional system. Anatomy, yes. Function, too diverse. Okay, so we're not going to be talking about the limbic system. So that's I said that. Okay. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about different structures in the midbrain areas. So basically, what do we have there? We have the thalamus there. We have the basal ganglia there. We have the hippocampus. We have the amygdala, and we have the hypothalamus. And then we have some structures like the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis in there and stuff like that. So we want to kind of look at how all these things are interconnected. And I kind of want to relate that to what this might mean for a patient coming into my practice. So just before we look into that, one of the basic ideas is that if you perceive something, it could be pain, it could be something you hear, it could be something you see, you never only perceive what you perceive right now. You always have a mixture of what you sense right now and what you sensed in the past. So the brain is always comparing data. So if it does not have a comparison, if there is no data there, the brain would probably more go into a mode of, I don't know about this, so this could be something that could be dangerous. So that's one part of the amygdala. It's doing, oh, there's something new. I don't know anything about that. So I have to kind of figure out now, is this dangerous for me or is this not dangerous for me? So that's what the amygdala basically does. So, but if we have data, like if I have experience about something, my brain is always going to go back to that experience. And I just want to talk about one patient I had just a few days ago, and we'd worked on her hip. She had hip pain for a few months, quite severe. She couldn't really walk, just like 100 meters, and then her pain would be so severe that she would stop walking. So she couldn't go for a walk, she couldn't exercise, all these things are not possible. So first thing we did, of course, is check the proprioception, check the motor system, check all the nerves, check all the receptors and all these things, check the autonomic connections to the gut, and this check the proprioceptive system in the head, so the vestibular system, check the eyes, all these things. So we checked all that, and there was quite a few things, and of course the pain went down to, I say of course because that's what I experience most of the time, pain goes down 90%, so she comes back and says she's 10% left. So what we did then is kind of went into, because we kind of checked all the other aspects already, kind of went into more the mental, cognitive, emotional aspects. So one thing I asked her, and this is like kind of going back to remembering, and I like the term that Butler and Moseley use, neurotags. So what has my brain stored about my hip? So I went back to, I said, just walk around. She says, yeah, the pain is right here on my trochanter and a little bit in the back in the glutes, and but it's only 10% of what it used to be in the beginning when we started working. And then I asked her to tell me when was she pain-free, like before the thing with the hip happened, when was she pain-free? What did she do? Like she might have been walking, going for a walk, go walk around the lake. So the circumstances, the environment, all these things. Maybe she remembered what the weather was like or something, like her last day of pain-freeness. So we just went back and we just took that memory into her head. So she was remembering that. And then I just asked her to walk. So then she started walking, and she said, oh, that's interesting, the pain is gone now. I said, well, that's how it is, because maybe the pain she's experiencing right now is just her remembering that it was painful yesterday, it was painful before that day, and was painful all the past weeks and months. So her brain is always going back to, I'm gonna go on my leg, and what did it feel like yesterday? And this part of memory can go and make us have an experience of pain, although there is no reason, proprioceptive, muscle function reason to have pain right now. So that's always a very interesting thing when people realize that their mind is kind of tricking them, because she thinks she has a pain in the hip, but it's only her brain thinking she has a pain in her hip because it was there yesterday and the day before. And it seems like the more data we have on pain, the more data the brain can go back to. Yeah, pain, so it must also be painful today. So that's one thing that's always a nice thing for patients to experience, because then they can alter their pattern of thinking. So it's not always good to go backwards, but that's one thing you can use to go into a point where there's a memory of pain being pain-free. So that's always legitimate to do that, to alter pain patterns, because what we need to do, this is something that's called extinction learning. So the people have to learn, and this is what we're talking about when we're talking about midbrain structures. We're talking about learning, we're talking about memory. People need to relearn their perception about their hip. So another thing we did, then I just let her walk again, and just come back to here now, where we are right now, and their pain is back to 10%. So now we did another thing. We did more like a cognitive thing. I asked her, well, what's your thought on your hip? Like, what do you think about your hip? And she said, well, I'm kind of like, I don't remember if she said worried, but I kind of wonder if my hip is worn. So she's thinking about a worn cartilage, things like that. So thinking about a worn cartilage is probably not the best thing to think about if you want to move pain-free. So then again, I just asked her to say, well, how about thinking about your hip as being nice and well-shaped and all these kinds of things. I mean, it also depends on what kind of anatomical knowledge people have. So the way they can fantasize about their body. But basic knowledge is pretty much there for everybody. So she went into a state of mind in terms of, oh, my hip is really beautiful and all well, and she kind of also went into the future. That was interesting by herself, saying, well, it's healing. So she's not saying, oh, I wonder how worn it is, and also the question mark is also a problem. So if people have a question mark, say, could it be worn? The question mark is like, I don't know, and I don't know could be translated in the brain as, then it could be painful. So she was thinking about, I have a nice hip and it's healing. So she started walking again, the pain is down to 0 again. So this was a nice example of how mental issues, and I like to call it mental, I don't like to call it emotional or cognitive so much, because it has these things, it's just mental patterns. So it could be emotional, it could be cognitive, but it's just mental. So just playing some tricks on the brain mentally. And it's, people sometimes then say, well, I'm kind of tricking my brain, I'm kind of like fooling it. Say, well, no, you are not, but yes, maybe you are, but you're also fooling your brain if you're saying, oh, my hip is worn. That's also fooling your brain into thinking that there's something bad going on, and then what's the brain's reaction? Say, well, then I think that should be painful, because also maybe I heard, now we're coming back to memory, well, my neighbor had a worn hip and she was in pain, and maybe also my father or my parents somebody had a worn hip and that was painful. So if I have a worn hip, that must be painful too. So that's one thing that's very important. I don't want to overemphasize it because it's just one part of the whole neurological aspect. So it's not all psychosomatic as much as it's not all body function. It's always a mixture. The brain is always involved. There's some nice studies done I think mainly in Japan. They're studying acupuncture and they're studying reflex mechanisms in terms of what if I put a needle or if I pinch the skin at that point, what's going to happen with the gut function. So they're like saying, well, if I pinch the skin, the gut's going to start working more. So trying to explain why acupuncture or things like that or acupressure might work. And so one thing they're always saying in those studies say, well, as long as you stay on the spinal level and it's just all reflexive, it's very, very easy and you can reproduce it several times. So the system, the reflex can be reproduced. But as soon as the brain or the upper parts of the brain, it's a whole different ballgame because there's experience coming into the ballgame, there's thoughts coming into the ballgame, there's culture coming into the ballgame. So a different culture, different thinking about pain, different thinking about all these things. So that's all coming into play right here. But as I say that, of course, this is not only midbrain structures, but midbrain structures are like the hub where all these informations are then put down into the body. And we just want to talk about some circuits that are going on here, so how these things are interconnected, because they're not single units, like everything in the brain is not single units, they're all connected, and these are kind of nicely connected into some loops, memory loops, Papez loop, or the other is the output of the amygdala. And we just want to look at that because that kind of puts everything into a context. So now I'm looking for my black pen, which is right here over at the table, and I'm looking for my black pen. So here's my black pen. And what I'm going to draw is the amygdala. So here is the amygdala. I'm just going to put a big A in that. So first kind of like misunderstanding is people saying, oh, the amygdala is the center of fear or something like that. Well, no, it has nothing to do with fear. Fear is happening all over in the brain, but it's not happening in the amygdala. Fear is a human experience, which has a lot of cognitive aspects. So the only thing that the amygdala is kind of evaluating if the situation I'm in is safe or it's not safe. So information coming in from my body. So I'm feeling pain in my body. Maybe I'm feeling some pain lower right abdomen, something, oh, what could be going on there? Maybe I have some inflammatory process there. So not feeling safe can come from the inside, but not feeling safe also, of course, can come from the outside. What I see, what I hear, what I smell, what I feel on my body. So all this information is going into the amygdala, and the amygdala has one single output. So this single output, and to emphasize, also safe is evaluated. And one thing, this is the part where it says, oh, I don't know that. What is this going to be? Is this going to be safe or not safe? So novel stimuli. So a nice experiment they did in the past, showing pictures of people looking with grim faces, and then they looked at the function of the amygdala and say, oh, the amygdala's function is going up. But in the end, a while later, and I'm saying years later, they found out that it's not the grim look on the face, it's just the new face. It's a face somebody hasn't seen. So that's causing the amygdala to react, because the amygdala needs to evaluate a new situation. So this is new experience. And the output is through the stria terminalis. So that's the stria terminalis going out of the amygdala. That's the only output. There's a lot of inputs from all over the place, visual, olfactory, proprioceptive, all these inputs. Stria terminalis. So that's the only output going to the BNST. That's the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, BNST. So, and here you have like a division of right now and new, and this is like going on for a longer time. So there's more focus shifting from, if we're talking about emotion, all these things, or psychological aspects, or more shift from here to there, because this is like just right now. Is this safe right now? And this is more like, well, on the long run. This is more an experience, long-term experience, connection to the people, relationships, things like that. Being rejected activates the BNST. So if you feel rejected, or if you're being rejected several times, this might be activated and cause high blood pressure, for example, because this, and also the amygdala, very strong connection to the heart system, to the cardiovascular system. So a lot of parts in the BNST, when you stimulate those, it will activate it will activate heart function. So this is the output, the stria terminalis. So you have the now and the long-lasting things to look at. We might say emotionally. We could also just say stress response. How do I react to this situation? And this then is going to the hypothalamus. So here we have all the autonomic regulatory processes going on, parasympathetic, sympathetic, the paraventricular nucleus, which has sympathetic, parasympathetic, and endocrine function in it, and that is then going out to the autonomic nervous system. One part we already talked about, periaqueductal gray in the mesencephalon. So that's one part of the what's also sometimes called the emotional motor system. So this is one part of the loop going out, and of course this is then feeding back. So then I have an experience. I might have my heart racing, and whatever experience I had before, maybe I never had the experience of my heart racing. So now it's feeding back into the amygdala. Maybe that's creating more output. So now I'm maybe caught in a loop of fear, we might want to say, or body reactions. And that's one thing I always want to emphasize. And somebody asked a question. Yeah, I'll just go live, that's fine. Wherever I'm live now, thank you for putting me live on there. Whatever I'm doing, I'm okay with that. Okay, so here we have the feedback loop. So, and one thing I always want to do is I want to kind of, when I work with my patients, get out of like psychology a little bit, psychologize things, because first of all, what they're actually talking about is a body experience. So they're talking about not getting any breath. They're talking about having their heart race, starting to sweat, getting weak knees. All these things are happening, and everything else that's going on in their head could only be an explanation the brain is trying to provide for what's going on right now. So that's what we like to call the left side of the brain, the temporal lobe, the interpreter, saying, well, how can I explain this now? And if I don't have a logic explanation, I will just make one up. So people are just giving you explanations in practice because they have to explain what's going on. But this explanation could be completely right or completely wrong or something in between. So never trust an explanation, because the body is having an experience and it could be triggered by something also unconsciously, of course. And then the conscious brain is trying to figure out what this means and why this is caused. Well, I got sick because I had an egg for breakfast this morning. Well, maybe it was not the egg. Maybe it was something I ate last night, or maybe 3 days ago, because my immune system has a late reaction on something I ate. But this morning I felt sick, so it must be the egg. Now I'm kind of remembering that and say, maybe I shouldn't eat any eggs because that might make me sick. So coincidence is a big aspect of having experiences. So what we have here is the hippocampus, one also of the major regions. I'm going to kind of draw it not the way it is. Should be a little bit like this and go up here. So hippocampus, yeah, you know what I mean. The hippocampus is the gate to memory. Yes, well, what is it in the first place? It's visual data processing. So V1 is like the most upstream processing of visual information coming right from the eye, and then we have V2 and V3 and V4 and V5 and something like that. In the end, it ends up in the hippocampus. So hippocampus is the highest order of visual processing. So why does it relate to memory? Because a lot of things we remember are visual memories, like where is the toilet in my practice? Okay, I just have to go down the hall and go to the right. Where do I have my my insurance policies? Oh, I have to go in my house, go up the stairs, go in my office, and then go left, and there's all my files, all my insurance policies, all of that. So a lot of things we remember are visual memories. So what are the circumstances under which that happens? Also, this has a lot to do with navigation, because of course visual data also implies navigation. So sometimes when I have the feeling, or when I have a hint or something that people are having trouble moving because they have to navigate something maybe new or also something very common, I kind of like to test them by saying, well, what's your knee function? What's your muscle function? What's your joint function like when you just lie there or do something? So now how does that change if I'm now navigating through my house in my head? So now I'm processing a lot of visual data, navigating, and this is like, maybe you could call it the allocentric navigation, not egocentric. So I'm not there, I'm not navigating there, but I'm kind of like navigating there in my mind, like I would explain to somebody. If somebody asked me, well, where are your insurance policies in the house so I can get them for you? Well, you have to go up the stairs, go to the left. So that's kind of called an allocentric navigation. So that's happening with the hippocampus, in the hippocampus, also where I'm located in my environment, but also in the parahippocampal areas. That's where the grid cells are located. So there's a lot of visual data, a lot of navigation going on. Okay, so that has a lot to do with memory, because if I ask you now, right now, and I ask you, well, why don't you think of how you get from where you are, and maybe you're at home, to your kitchen? Boom, here are some pictures coming up. Okay, down the hall, I go left, I go down the stairs, and then turn right, and then I'm in the kitchen. So there it is, a whole bunch of data coming up just because I asked you to think of that. So that's probably coming out of this, but not only this. So the data is not inside the hippocampus. We know that the data is not stored here, as much as not all data is stored in the amygdala, remembering fearful or dangerous, not fearful, dangerous things. It's also stored in other parts of the brain. So you can erase memory by removing the hippocampus. You will remove semantic memory. You will remove episodic memory. You will not remove procedural memory. So because procedural memory, so how do I do that? How do I tie my shoes? How do I put a nail in the wall? All these things are not going through hippocampus. So that's motor memory. That's something very different. That's motor cortex, that's cerebellum. This is more visual memory and also some maybe auditory memory, semantics. So this is called an iPhone. Sorry, I'm doing some commercial for propagating Apple. Sorry, this is a smartphone. This is a whiteboard. So things that are associated. So I can kill that by taking out the hippocampus. Why would you do that? Well, some people get their hippocampus removed because it might be a site of epileptic seizures. So they have to remove that. They can't remember things like which is the highest mountain in the world, and they can also not learn new things that are related to that, but they can learn new skills. But then they probably would forget why they learned a new skill. That's the problem with removing the hippocampus. So output of the hippocampus through the so now I'm missing a term. That happens all the time. Yeah. So this is the output of the hippocampus going into the mammillary corpora mammillaris. So I'm trying to stay with Latin, German Latin expression. So this is one part where memory goes to. This is like just below the hypothalamus, or in the range of the hypothalamus. This is vitamin B1 dependent. B1 dependent. So if you have an alcoholic who starts forgetting things or has trouble with his memory, this is probably the site of the problem, and this is also caused by vitamin B1 deficiency because that's what they often lack. But you don't have to be an alcoholic to lack B1, so it can also happen through other terms. So this then information is going back to the thalamus. This is right here. This is called the Papez loop, the thalamus. And from the thalamus, then it's going up here to the cingulate cortex, which is like around the corpus callosum. Gyrus cinguli, GC, cingulate gyrus, then you would say GC, CG, yeah, okay. Or you say, and that's the most common, cingulate cortex. And then here you have the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, and the PCC, and the mid, and so on. So divisions, parts, and stuff like that. So that's going back there, and from there it's going back to the hippocampus. So that's like a loop, and loops are always good to store information. So that's the Papez loop. And if you have trouble in any of these areas, you might not remember, or you might not be able to store things you should be able to store. So vitamin B1 deficiency is just one problem. Of course, another whole bunch of problems can show up. So does this create any output? Somewhere it will create output. Somewhere this is also connected then through here, like through to the basal ganglia and to other parts. Of course, we have the autonomic output right here. And well, this is where information is going through these loops, causing the brain to take information that I'm currently perceiving and matching it or looking for resemblance in the past. And that's one of the key points. It's resemblance. It's not, oh, I experienced exactly the same thing before. It looks like. So something could be like, oh, I have a pain in my hip. It's similar to the pain in my shoulder I had like a year ago. So now the brain is starting to associate, and that's going to change the way pain is perceived, because maybe I'm thinking, that was nothing in the shoulder, that just went away 2 days later, and that same thing might happen to the hip, because now my brain is like processing that information and like putting a program on it and creating output. So, oh, it's going to be gone in 2 days, wonderful. If the problem is, oh, my shoulder pain was there like for 3 months and was really getting awful, and I had to take all this medication, I had to do all these things, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't do my sports and stuff like that, the brain might apply this resembling knowledge to now what's the hip problem. So this is also a thing to look for, and I'm always looking for past situations, like, did this happen before? When did this pain show up the first time? Oh, it first showed up, oh, I was really stressed out back then. Maybe the pain had nothing to do with the stress, but it came up at the same point of time. For example, I don't know, some problems in the job or some problems in relationships or something like that. Mostly one of those two things. And maybe at the same point of time, I played tennis and I tripped and I fell on my knee and I had really severe knee pain. and I was also really stressed out, but not stressed out because of my knee pain. I was stressed out because of something else happening in my life. Now the brain is adding one and one, saying, well, I'm stressed out and I have knee pain. So now I have a new situation. I'm stressed out, and the brain is saying, well, shouldn't I have knee pain then? Or I'm having knee pain and my brain is getting stressed out, saying, well, this is what happened last time. Butler and Mosley, neurotags, nice term for that. So just these zip data files. So everything is like compressed into very simple zip data files, concepts it's also called in neuroscience. So they're saying we're building concepts, and that's one of the important things. It doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be a causality. So it doesn't have to be, well, this caused that. So the stress does not cause the knee pain, but it was a coincidence. So very often it's just coincidence. What fires together wires together, that way around. So, and firing together does not mean it has to do something with each other. It's just, oh, by some chance I had this, and by some chance I had that, now I'm connecting it, this is coming, this might come back at us. Of course, it depends on the severity, it depends on the length of the time. And what has to happen then, since this is always feeding information into our system that might cause or be part of the problem, of course, this has to be unlearned. So it's called extinction learning, which is what is happening when then somebody experiences a new feeling in the knee or whatever is hurting, or in the gut. And the brain is not saying, well, it was there yesterday, it was there the day before, in the past weeks, in the past months, all this time I had this problem, so why should it not be here today? So this is part of all these midbrain structures. So the amygdala, the hippocampus, the thalamus, the cingulate cortex is not really part of the midbrain structures, but I put it here because it's part of the pappus loop, and of course the BNST and the hypothalamus and all these things going into the autonomic nervous system. And there's one important area also here, so not so much the autonomic output, which is coming mostly from the paraventricular nucleus. It's the subthalamic locomotor region, SLR. So that's like the emotional, well, be careful with that term, the motivational motor system. So this is coming out of experience. So that's when people like say, I'm getting all tensed up because I think this situation is not very good. It has nothing to do with mathematics, with the cognitive motor system, which we're going to talk about when we talk about the cortex. I don't know if it's going to be next time. Maybe we're going to talk about this some more, do some practical stuff with this. So, but we're going to get back to that. So, subthalamic locomotor region here in the hypothalamus region, going on to motor neurons, somewhere in the area of the substantia nigra, mesocephalon. So that's where they meet, the mathematician and the emotional, remembering, or maybe also fantasizing part of the brain, saying, well, it could be like this, could be like that. That's going on the same neuron going down to the muscles. So here we have psychosomatics. So this is the anatomical basis for psychosomatics. And remember, all this is connected to other parts of the brain, visual, proprioceptive part of the brain, visual, auditory, and so on, and so on, and so on. So what we didn't talk about here, and I have to look at the time. Oh, time is almost gone. So what we need to quickly talk about, basal ganglia. I just need to mention that. Basal ganglia are kind of sitting on the sides, several nuclei. We don't want to talk about those right now. Just two basic things. Movement selection, the architect of movement. You could also say it's a bit of the fancy term. Movement selection is probably the more basic term. How do I select movements? Well, what is going to be successful? What is successful? Well, if I get to do, or what is effective? What if the thing happens I want to happen? That's one of the effectiveness. Maybe also it's effective because I don't piss off anybody else. All right. So if I do movement that might piss off somebody else, might not be very effective, but it could be effective for me, but not effective for somebody else. So now I might get a conflict. So that's where the basal ganglia are involved in all this decision making. Well, how am I going to move? How am I going to make this a success? And maybe not only for me, but maybe also for other people. So these things are always playing a role. And there's two major things happening when basal ganglia are not working. It's, English terms now. Akinesia, so not being able to move. Parkinson's Yeah, so not being able to move, too much inhibition, because basal ganglia are GABA systems. So too much inhibition, not enough disinhibition. So not being able to move. Another thing is like Huntington's, like too much movement, uncontrolled, or dyskinesia, I think you say, too much dopamine. Problem when you have Parkinson's with too much dopamine, they start moving around, they can't stop moving. So not enough, too much disinhibition. So not enough disinhibition, too much disinhibition, not enough movement, too much movement, not the right kind of movement. So that's where GABA and dopamine play a huge role. And of course we know now that Parkinson's is much more than just substantia nigra, and dopamine has also to do with GABA systems in the basal ganglia. Another GABA system, the cerebellum, also an inhibitory system. Okay, so this is a brief look at midbrain structures, loops, and outputs of amygdala, hippocampus, Papus loop, BNST, hypothalamus, autonomic nervous system. Maybe I should put the other one here, like the somatomotor system, coming from the SLR. That's it for today. Thank you for watching. We recorded everything, of course. And I'm going to say hello to everybody. Hello. And thanks for watching. I'll be back in 2 weeks. And of course, this is going to be on Instagram TV. And we will be, I will post it in a couple of minutes. And we will be live again in 2 weeks. Thanks. Bye-bye. And have a nice evening.